I never expected to discover my wife's betrayal the way I did. It started with a strange feeling in my gut, the kind you can't explain but can't ignore either. One evening, while Lisa was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Something about it felt off, an instinct I wish had been wrong. I picked it up, expecting nothing. But there it was, a string of messages from someone named Dan. As I scrolled, each message felt like a blade to the chest. They weren't just flirtatious. They were intimate, explicit, full of emotion and memories that had nothing to do with me. I felt the world tilt beneath me. Everything I thought we had, our marriage, our trust, was nothing more than a carefully built illusion. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't cry or yell. Instead, I smiled like nothing was wrong, kissed her goodnight, and told her I loved her. Inside, though, I was crumbling. But I knew one thing. If I wanted to handle this my way, I needed proof, concrete, undeniable, and complete. So, I began to gather it. In the days that followed, I became a shadow in my own home. While Lisa laughed on the phone or made plans to work late, I watched quietly. I checked her call logs, her location history, and backed up her messages without her knowing. I even installed a discreet camera in the living room, something I hated doing but felt justified under the weight of her betrayal. Every smile she gave me during those days felt like a lie. Every kiss was a trick, and I played along, pretending I hadn't seen the late-night rendezvous or the kisses she shared with Dan in their parked car outside his apartment. Something inside me began to change. I wasn't the same man I was before reading those texts. The warmth I once felt toward her was replaced by something cold and calculating. My heart didn't ache the way I expected, it hardened. I stopped asking why she did it. I stopped begging for reasons. I began to focus on what I could control, how it would end. My first move was financial. Quietly, methodically, I drained our joint savings account and moved the money into an account under my name only, one she didn't know about. I canceled any automatic transfers and even changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. I updated my will to make sure not a single cent would go to her, regardless of what happened next. It wasn't about greed. It was about taking back the power she had stolen from me the moment she chose someone else over our vows. As the days passed, I planned every detail of what would be the final confrontation. I couldn't just tell her I knew. I needed her to feel what I had felt, the shock, the disbelief, the pain. I waited for the day she'd be at work for a full shift, then I acted. I hired a moving company to empty the entire house. Every piece of furniture, every photo, every shared memory gone. I left only one thing in the living room. A single dining table in the center of the room, a red rose placed gently on it, and a manila envelope containing the divorce papers. Next to it sat a USB drive plugged into the TV, ready to play a slideshow of all the evidence I had collected. Screenshots of texts, videos, photos, everything. When Lisa came home that evening, I watched from the shadows of the hallway as she stepped into the silent, empty space. Her heels clicked against the bare floor, echoing through the house like the ticking of a clock counting down the end. She froze as she saw the table. Her eyes moved from the rose to the envelope, then to the TV, where the slideshow began automatically. Her face drained of color as the images began to roll. She covered her mouth, staggered back, and let out a sound between a gasp and a sob. Every frame hit her like a punch. The kisses, the messages, the hotel receipts. She turned, as if searching for me, but I remained hidden, letting her sit with the truth. When she finally saw me, standing at the edge of the hallway, her eyes were wide with panic and regret. But I didn't say a word. I simply pointed to the envelope and walked past her, out the door and into the night. The days that followed were strangely peaceful. I didn't cry. I didn't regret. I started to rebuild, slowly and quietly. I bought new furniture, pieces I actually liked, not ones we had agreed on out of compromise. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with during the marriage. I even joined a weekend hiking group, something I had always wanted to do, but had shelved for years. In time, I found comfort in the smallest things, the quiet hum of my new refrigerator, the way the sunlight poured into the living room at dusk, the smell of fresh coffee on a Sunday morning. One evening, I sat on my new couch with a glass of whiskey in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The pain was still there, but so was something else: peace. She took a part of me when she betrayed me, but I took something back. And that made all the difference. In the weeks that followed, I fully embraced the stillness of my new life. The silence that once would have felt lonely now felt like peace. There were no more fake smiles across the dinner table. No more waiting up at night, wondering if she'd come home late again with a rehearsed excuse. The tension that had quietly suffocated me for months, or maybe even years, was gone. I poured my energy into small routines. Morning jogs became my reset button. I started cooking again, really cooking, not just heating up leftovers or ordering takeout. There was something grounding about chopping vegetables in a quiet kitchen, about seasoning food to my own taste without compromise. I even painted the walls in the living room a warm slate gray, something Lisa would have never approved of. It was a small thing, but it made the space feel like mine. Occasionally, I get a text from her, short messages asking if we could talk, saying she made a mistake, begging for another chance. But I never responded. I had nothing left to say. Her apology wouldn't undo what she'd done, and even if it could, I no longer wanted to go back. I had finally stepped outside the prison of our marriage and breathed air I didn't even know I was missing. As the months passed, I traveled a little. Nothing extravagant, just a few weekend trips to nearby towns, forests, lakes. I'd sit by the water, sometimes with a book, other times with a journal. I started writing down thoughts I hadn't been able to admit to myself before. How I had ignored the red flags. How I'd convinced myself things were fine when they clearly weren't. How I had given too much of myself to someone who didn't value it. But I wrote about strength too, about growth, boundaries, and healing. Slowly, new people entered my life. Not romantically at first, and I wasn't looking for that. I met people through my hiking group, at cafes, even a local book club I joined on a whim. These were simple, genuine connections, honest and light, free of secrets or pretense. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as someone's husband, not as the guy who gave up everything to keep a crumbling marriage alive, but as me. It wasn't all easy. There were nights when memories crept in, uninvited and heavy. I'd think back to the early days of our marriage, the laughter, the shared dreams. I'd wonder how it all went so wrong. But I didn't stay in that place for long. I'd remind myself that healing isn't forgetting. It's learning to live without bitterness. Eventually, I started dating again. Carefully, slowly. I met someone kind, thoughtful, and steady. Not flashy or dramatic. There was no rush, no pressure. Just mutual respect and the quiet thrill of something real forming again, brick by brick, trust by trust. One night, nearly a year after I left Lisa behind, I stood on the back deck of my new place, a tumbler of whiskey in hand. The sky was painted in shades of amber and purple, the kind of sunset that makes you pause without realizing it. I breathed in the cool evening air and let the peace settle into my bones. I had been through hell, yes. But I had made it out, not just intact, but stronger. I had rebuilt a life not based on revenge or anger, but on truth and self-worth. What she destroyed had forced me to discover who I really was. And in the end, that was the greatest freedom of all.